Okay, cool. Thank you, Cherie. LJ?
Yeah, just like Sharia, my bad that I'm always signing up for this. It is what it is, right?
Keep it going, bro. Yeah.
Hey, look, I'm a black man. This is African masculinity class. I feel like I got something to add to a lot of these topics. I think I'm versed in it, so be it, right? So with that being said, we had a good conversation in our breakout room, but I want to kind of share some of the things I took away as I was watching the video. Particularly the second video, right? So this was a video in '94. So I kind of did a timeline. Mm-hmm. So the first video was when he was in high school. So he's about 17 years old, right? So he's in high school. You notice he got the high top fade, the kind of like the little Gumby thing going on. And so that video, so that interview was 5 years, if I'm correct, before he did Juice, which he had the same hairstyle, but he's a little bit older. Yep. So a year later, he does this interview in '94, and you can see the maturation, right? So in the first video, he's very reflective. Mm-hmm. He talks about his childhood, and he talks about growing up hard, and he talks about his mom, and the roots and the background of being a Black Panther, and what it meant for his friends, to be able to call her by her first name. You know what I'm saying? And the significance of that. So he's very reflective as a child, was a 17-year-old. And, that this kind of reminded me of some of our early readings where it talks about the transition, right? The boy who writes a passage. So he's very reflective. 94, you fast forward, he's 23. So now, he's kind of like full-fledged revolutionary mode. What I admire, about the interview and what I shared in the group is that, you notice he didn't buckle, like no stuttering. There was no inconsistency in how he felt. Like he didn't have to second guess himself. He didn't have to defend himself. He didn't have to like change,
Is it me or is everybody shit? Oh,
fuck. I can hear you fine.
I think it froze. Yeah.
It's LJ. I thought it was my computer. All right. So hopefully we'll get him back. While we get him situated, is there anyone that would like to go after LJ? Okay. So what we'll do is, I'm sorry, who said that? Okay, bet, you're back. Go ahead, LJ, go ahead. I'm sorry. You're on mute, bro.
All right, cool. Then he also talked about, like folks, coming up in these news conferences and telling us how to talk and the language you use, but they're not around. And he talked about Jesse Jackson, and I thought, well, he got a point. Like on the real, he got a point. You do have people at that time. So this is the '90s. This was before social media. You do got people saying, hey, you can't say this, you can't. And I remember Jesse Jackson and Al Sharp, the rest of them, and we respect them, the Black community leaders, but they wasn't there. He's right. He was, and one thing about Tupac, he didn't leave the hood, he was amongst the people. Yep. Oh, this is true. So I'm like, okay, check, he got a point. He also made a point about, by being defined as a gangster rapper. He said, well, what about Frank Sinatra? Is he a gangster singer? Steven Seagal, is he a gangster actor? So I'm like, you know what? Yep, he's right. Which kind of ties into, being able to create a narrative, white people, whoever it is, media has always been able to create a narrative when it comes to Black people. And with this narrative, they can take it and run with it. Tupac's a thug. He's a gangster rapper. And with these narratives, you can continue to demonize people. So, but that's not the case with a Frank Sinatra from Steven Seagal. And I'm like, he's right. Yeah. I acknowledge that. My fifth point, he talked about being raised by his mother, right? Which helped develop his feminine side. So he kind of acknowledges, the upbringing of his mom, kind of, giving him the softer feminine side. And he said being raised by the street, it kind of infused his masculinity. He didn't have a father, so the streets was his father. And how the streets kind of, gave him the characteristics of being tough, hardened, the strength and endurance. And so that tied me back to the readings where, it tied me to the readings where, we've kind of talked about, women, matriarchal systems in which, women have been, the leads in a lot of the, African cultures pre, colonial days, and how that was normalized. And in this sense, because he grew up in America or grew up in this country, he had that, but he also had the streets. And what the streets shaped, what he, this idea of how he's supposed to be a man. And so I kind of took that for what it's worth. And I thought that was a very fascinating point. And then last but not least, which is what I shared in our group, is that, Tupac, again, was another gem, man, gone too soon. He was taken from us very soon, very prophetic, very intelligent, which he doesn't get credit for. Like, you can look up videos about him, kind of speaking about, where we at. We got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. You know what I mean? And I also think of like some of the, just a handful. He got so many songs, man, that speaks, that speaks to power. You know what I'm saying? Keep your head up. Brenda Has a Baby. California Love. To Live and Die in LA. And I think this is a question that we all have. A lot of us, man. I wonder if heaven got a ghetto. So, so that was kind of like my takeaway, man. Like in that second, he shot so many gems, man. And if you're not paying attention, it goes right over your head.
Yeah. Thank you, LJ. We'll get one more and then we'll move into my notes. Who would like to comment?
I can go. I just thought it was really interesting in the first interview, and I kind of took it back to what we were talking about, I think last class, where he was reflecting on ancient civilizations dismantling the school system. I thought that was super, I don't know, that was just really awesome he was so eloquent the way he's speaking at 17 years old, and drawing back on that was just really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all for sharing. Yeah, and I think probably like LJ, just due to where I grew up and the time that I grew up, Tupac is like almost a god in a sense for me. And I didn't come up in the time of Malcolm, so I didn't see that. I didn't see Malcolm in real time and what they call media res, but I saw Pac, and Pac is one of those people, like, to LJ's point, right? It's not like social media era that didn't exist then, but he very much lived a social media life, if you will, in the sense that what was happening to him was unfolding in front of everyone. And he literally is an individual who grew up for the short time that he was able to grow up in front of our eyes, and he talks about in the videos how he didn't have this police presence in his life until he got famous, right? And because of that, we got to see like insights into his life that you don't get to see at that time with other celebrities, right? Like the third wall, if you will, was really broken down for Pac. And I think not only because of his circumstances, but because of who he was, the authenticity of who he was. And if you listen to what he talks about, you can kind of put pieces of his puzzle together through his lyrics, through his interviews, and all the little gems that he's left throughout the world. So I hold him in very high regard. To me, he's my generation's Malcolm X, if you will. And he also speaks to a very specified depiction of manhood. And that's why I brought him into our conversation as we kind of close out the semester and start to think about, we theorize this notion of manhood for all of these weeks. Now we're kind of getting to look at how this theory plays out in certain individuals, Malcolm X, Tupac Shakur, Nipsey Hussle, right? And that's kind of where we'll be going through our semester. But, and I wanted to give you 3 different versions of Pac, because again, he died at 25, so it was a very short life, but you see these evolutions of him, right? They're evolutions, but the core remains the same. Like that 17-year-old boy that you see in the interview, the first interview, is still there in that 23-year-old young man in the second interview. And although you have to look a lot deeper in the third interview, that 17-year-old boy is still there, right? But he's gone through a lot, right? And I think also what's interesting and you look at the 3 separate videos and you look at the circumstances that surround those 3 videos, right? Fresh out of high school, the day before he would get a guilty verdict to go to prison, right? And then one of the last interviews that he does before his life is taken from this earth. And how ego, how miscommunication, how outside forces can come into play and really detour your life. Because I don't believe, and it's funny because me and my wife was talking about this earlier before class started, like, I don't think and I don't believe that gangster rap was who Tupac was. I don't believe that that's what he aspired to be. I don't even think, to some regard, that's why he was placed on this planet. I don't believe that that was his mission. I think he's gotten distracted or detoured into that, so to speak, by who he came and aligned himself with once he'd gotten out of prison, right? A la Suge Knight, right? Very brilliant individual. And if you think about the 3 individuals that we'll be dealing with to close out the semester, Malcolm X, Tupac, Nip, they're all vivacious readers, all well literate, all well read, and you see that reflected in their thoughts, right? So this is another component of manhood for me that I'm very attentive to. So just kind of thinking about the first interview, right? He's saying, I was raised real. And it's funny, I think about this term real a lot. Cultural studies, right? That's my training. They say that you learn a lot about a culture by the language that's being used, right? And this word real for me is something that I become very hyper attentive to. So when I was growing up, a very predominant slogan was keep it real. You got to keep it real. You got to keep it real, right? And you think about hip hop, right? At this time where Pac is coming up, the era of hip hop that I grew up under, you had to be real, right? If you were inauthentic, you had no credibility, right? So I'm bringing this up to say that there's a culture that was being produced in the mid-90s that authenticity was of the utmost, right? And now, in this social media culture, in this everybody wanting to go viral culture, what is considered real has shifted, if that makes sense, right? Especially if you look at hip hop, right? Part of the time when keep it real was a core component of hip hop, you couldn't rap about some shit that did not happen to you or you did not do, right? But now majority of the rappers is rapping about shit they don't own, they ain't experienced, they will never experience, right? So this idea of keeping real has been effaced. And then we can look at hip hop as an example to that, right? Also, when he's 17, and maybe it's the question that's being asked that's prompting him to answer in this certain way, but he's attentive to being ready to be an adult, right? He's very much concerned with being prepared for adulthood, right? And he's also, I don't know me, I want to go back and watch the first interview and like do a tally of how many times he says society. And for me, this speaks to the fact that he has a very, very, very hyper attentive social consciousness. He's always was talking about how society will be impacted, how society is being shaped, how he will shape society. So he has a very large social concern, right? Social awareness. To Cherie's point, he's hyper attentive to what the youth is inheriting, right? What state of the planet is he inheriting as a young man? And how can he change that? Because he also knows that the youth historically have been those who have shaped the society, right? Keep in mind who his mother was, a Black Panther, right? A Black Panther, an organization that was started by 2 19-year-olds, right? So the youth is very important. And then his mother, I mean, almost to me, society and his mama was constant through those interviews, right? And you see that, and you all articulated the role that his mother played. But for me, I wrote down because she asked him, what did she instill in you? He said, respect, knowledge, speak your mind, but also listen, right? And understanding. So those are like the core gems that he extracted from his mother. Moving into the 94 interview, I love how it starts off. And also, if you guys pay close attention, it's a chop up of the total interview. So that way you kind of get bits and pieces of it. But, you know, my big mouth, right? He says, what is it that gets you in trouble? And he says, my big mouth. But if you think about that deeply, right? He's been socialized, he's been raised to speak his mind, right? So although it may get him in trouble, but that's part of who he is. That's part of him being his authentic and his real self, right? They asked him about the evolution of hip hop's message and how it goes from like, you know, Grandmaster Flash and these type of message to the violence that has been ensued and articulated through hip hop in the early 90s. And I love his response to that question. Actually, this is probably one of my favorite Tupac quotes, right? So if you are hungry and you're knocking on the door and you asking for food and you look in the door, you see them throwing food around, having parties with the food, right? And they close the door in your face, and you come back and your song's going to change a little bit. You may knock a little harder. The song may get a little forceful, right? Because you're getting hungrier and you know that they're eating. And then they close the door in your face again, right? By that fourth time that you knock on that door, it's not even knocking no more. As he said, I'm picking through the lock, coming through blasting, right? The social conditions heighten the violence, heighten the crime, right? And if you pay close attention to what's going on right now, that's exactly what's happening, right? Because if y'all pay close attention, folks is robbing. Folks is running up in homes. Folks is getting ran up on in the street, right? If you're paying attention. And what's happening with our economy? It's crashing. So as the social conditions continue to erode, crime will continue to escalate, right? And he's attentive to that. You know, I also like the idea that he says society is leeching off the ghetto or Black culture another way, right? And if you think about that still happening today, I think about this social phenomenon that is K-pop, right? Essentially, all K-pop is Asian folks singing R&B. That's all it is. If you strip it down to its core, is Asian folks singing R&B, and that is a global phenomenon. But like Pac said, the world is leeching off of Black or ghetto culture, right? Everybody's wearing braids. Everybody's wearing long nails. Everybody's wearing hoop earrings. Those are all aesthetics that were considered to be ghetto that are now mainstream culture. Another one, a really foundational quote for me, I'm not going to change the world, but I'll spark the mind that may change the world. And that's really how I approach my pedagogy as a professor, right? It won't be me, but maybe I'll kind of kick the idea that will get someone to change the world. And then this idea that the rise of a Black Messiah for me, it kind of comes to the fore in Pac's articulation. Does everybody understand that reference, the rise of a Black Messiah? It's a movie, and it's also from the COINTELPRO files by J. Edgar Hoover. And he's saying that COINTELPRO is designed to stop the rise of a Black Messiah, right? So this is how this comes out to play in Pac. He says, imagine going to a concert and you're performing and there's hundreds of people at the show, and whatever I say, they'll do. If I say jump up and down, they jump up and down. If I say spin in a circle, they'll spin in a circle, right? This is something that Cherie comments on also. Then I have OGs, I have major hoodsters, right? Calling me, telling me that, yo, whatever you tell me to do, you give the word and it's on, right? So he said he knows how much power he possesses for the masses, for the underrepresented, for the wretched, for the underprivileged, for the subaltern. He knows that he's a spokesman for this group of people, right? But also they're the most dangerous group of people in society because they're the forgotten. Those who make up the quote unquote criminal element, right? But he said it scared him. It made it made him fearful, but he also knew that if it scares me, the power I possess is scaring others as well. And he's talking about the powers that be. He's talking about those who insinuate things like COINTELPRO, right? And this is why I say the rise of the Black Messiah, because that's the power that Pac had to be a Black Messiah. And he was absolutely right that frightened the powers that be. And that's why the legal troubles begin to surface for him, because they recognize his political powers. I also like the code of Thug Life. For those who don't know, Thug Life is an acronym for the hate you gave little infants fucks everyone. Thug Life, the hate you gave little infants fucks everyone, right? And he says, I established a code for Thug Life, so that way, the way that the streets will operate and move will be done in a fashion that's respectable, right? Innocent people are off, they're off limits, right? They don't get messed with. You don't do drive-bys because that allows innocent people to get hurt and harmed, right? So he wanted to bring a code of ethics to street activity, right? And for him, the thug is the underdog. The thug is the underprivileged or unrepresented. And I'll end it with this. I have more, but just looking at time, he draws a great comparison. And he says, what's the difference between give me liberty or give me death? And I don't give a fuck. How do you distinguish the two? Because they're saying the exact same thing, right? And to me, he had a brilliant way of taking high-level theoretical material and bringing it down to the quotidian everyday level that everyone can understand. Even someone who may be positioned to be illiterate is able to understand Pac's message because the way he's able to articulate it. He's able to paint a story that everyone can understand and that some capacity relate to, right? And for me, he's the greatest rapper of all time because he's more than a rapper, right? He's a philosopher, he's a poet, he's an intellectual, right? He's an activist. And those are all things that embody what hip hop was originally supposed to be. So I'll put it on pause there. We'll move from here into Fishbowl. Oh, and I'll say one thing about the last interview. For me, what jumps off the screen in the last interview is someone who has dealt with a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, and he's trying to process that. And there's a lot of anger and a lot of frustration because he don't feel that he's getting his just due, right? And as a man, I understand it, right? And when you put in that position, what would you expect someone to do? Unfortunately, it led to his untimely demise. But for me, that's what that last interview speaks to, just pain. Who would like to volunteer for the Fishbowl? We've got Emily, Catherine, we'll get one more. We have another volunteer. If not, I'll call at random. All right, Ishmael, have you done 2 Fishbowls already?
No, but I'll go.
Okay, cool. So we'll go with you 3, Ishmael, Catherine, and Emily. Whoever would like to start it off, it's on you.
I can go first.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to speak about a little bit more into what you were saying about him having talking a lot about society and code. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I got from his first interview was I was telling the girls in the group chat, he said this one thing that said there's a lot of dirt all around us, and he was speaking about obviously violence and all that stuff. And he, like you mentioned, his code where he didn't want that dirt getting around innocent people. And that's what he said. He's there shouldn't be no kidnapping, no drive-bys, so he said, even though there's a lot of dirt, I know that I could use my power, which is what he was saying if I tell people to do a certain thing, they're gonna do it. So he was saying that he was using his power in that case to keep the dirt in a certain place instead of everywhere. And I found that very interesting. I was that's it's true. And then I guess another thing that I kind of found more interesting as well was when he was saying about sharing his knowledge, that he might not be the person to like change the world, because like it's not something that it's just one individual. But he could share his knowledge for somebody else could help like do that, you know. So yeah, that's kind of what I got from Tupac.
Thank you, Emily. Good information. Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay.
I honestly didn't know much about like Tupac other than him being an artist, and I knew he like spoke about his community and like things that were happening. But other than that, like I never really listened to his music or anything, or I didn't know his like history. So in the first video, I was pretty shocked by like how young he was, and he sounded so confident in being able to handle the world. And like he was wanting to gain the respect at such a young age. And then in the second video, he was asked about how his content and lyrics could possibly be a bad influence to like young kids or just people. And then he said that what he wrote in his music was honest, and even though it wasn't politically correct or like accepted in society, people were able to relate to him, which shows that like he was always true to himself, and like he didn't let society change his view. And he knew that people were going to be able to relate to him, because he mentioned the people on the street with him were also going to jail, so that's like something they can connect to. So I thought it was interesting to learn more about him.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine, excuse me. Ishmael?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'll talk about how I guess this classification that we I guess the media gives on people. Like I guess I'll use like Tupac, for example, you know, being a rapper today, you know, people's opinions are very much dismissed by the classification that they're given. Like, you know, Tupac would be a rapper, so, and if he's talking about social issues, people would easily dismiss him as, oh, he's just a rapper, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or like, why should we care? And that really reminded me of a quote by Dave Chappelle when he was saying how when people are called crazy, that people shouldn't do that because that's dismissive of the person that is being called crazy, simply because you're not able to understand them. And yeah, so I that was something that I saw. And another thing that I found very interesting that always happens is that once you're in the public eye, as Tupac eventually, you know, as the bigger he got, the criminal record, he didn't have a criminal record, and out of nowhere he gets a criminal record, and you know, this narrative is created about him, and that's how I guess the majority of people would see him if they don't watch his interviews and actually see that he's actually really thoughtful. And yeah, I guess that's what I'll say for now.
Thank you, Ishmael. Armani?
Yeah, going back to what Ishmael said, I agree. It's nice sharing knowledge with people, because not a lot of people tend to know how other people act because of negative media, you know, and they're always constantly judging. So I tend to go on like YouTube and watch like this particular YouTuber, and he goes across different neighborhoods, rich or poor or whatever projects, and he shows people in a different light. And I think it's super informative, because if I was before watching these videos, like some guys in East Harlem or East, like in the projects, I would like, oh, I don't want to go there. But like seeing that, it's like, they're just people. They want to help out the community as well. They're not a threat. So it's just like refreshing to see people share their knowledge.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Armani. Cherie?
Just to piggyback off of my classmates, it definitely helps to get a broader spectrum on being around different races and how they attend to things, because then you'll get a more realistic idea of how people deal with situations that were already put at, as far as like us Black people, because I am a caretaker for 2 white women. They're totally nice and sweet and everything, but the situation makes me appreciate I have had that type strict single parent upbringing, because I'm prepared for a lot more. And with them, it seems like any little thing is like, oh my God, I'm poor. Sheree, it sucks to be poor. I'm like, girl, I'm Black. Like the world is built to make me poor. Like, you know, like I'm just like, just it's like I discussed this with my mother, because like right now she's like you, she's going back to school to get her master's, and she has her own business. Like she's gripped herself from being a teenage mother growing up in LA, like, you know, so all the things that she's been through and that I've seen and that I've been through for myself, and then seeing other races, like there's still Mexican people who don't believe that Mexican people had slaves. Like it's just that, like, people are not informative. Like I've taken Chicano studies class. Like I like to get a broader spectrum, because I'm, at the end of the day, it's not just my race here, it's everyone's race. So I'd like to just get to know everything and to see how different people handle themselves in situations. And for Tupac to go over in his first video when he's 17, like the differences of, like, you know, Black culture, you're not allowed to call your parents by their first name, it's disrespectful, but other people call their parents by their first name. So it's just like small things that really enlighten people and allow them to get a grasp of like different situations with different folks, is what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, I agree, but I think one thing I'll say, and not to counter, but just to add to that, you must know yourself first before you start to explore others, right? And I think it's important, especially for marginalized communities, to really situate yourself in knowing who you are and what produced who we are as a people, so you can understand. And I believe that would allow you to more effectively engage other cultures, right? Like I'm extremely appreciative for all the Indigenous people who are on this Zoom that are taking this course, right? I'm appreciative, but more importantly, I think that y'all also need to understand your culture, right? Like that's vastly important for you, right? And I think understanding your culture will allow you to have a deeper understanding of what's going on in African culture. I'm appreciative to the Asian students in the class, right? But again, I implore them to have a very deep understanding of Asian culture, because it's rich, it's old, and it's beautiful, right? And it will allow you to have a deeper understanding of African culture. So yes, we must have, be attentive to other cultures and have informational access to other cultural norms, but we first must be grounded in who we are as a people. And I'm not just speaking for African people, I'm speaking all cultures across the board, because we all have been vastly impacted by white culture, whatever that is, right? Any other last minute comments before we close out? No one? Okay, thank you, Armani. All right, so let me point out where, go ahead, Markeisha. Actually, I'm gonna ask you to speak, so that's perfect. Go ahead, Markeisha.
Uh-oh. Well, I actually wasn't gonna speak on this topic. I was actually gonna more talk about the topic of that you want the $40 or the $65 regular?
Go ahead, sis.
My bad, I'm sorry. I'm over here trying to get my oil changed. But anyways, I was gonna say that I actually wanted to hear your thoughts on what you kind of left this cliffhanger last week about the article about the judge or whatever. They were talking about how like her success is due to her white husband, and you said we were going to more talk about that this week. And I know the Tupac thing, you know, is good and everything, but I just kind of wanted to hear what she said if we have time really quick.
Yeah. Do you want to know what I think about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about the most concise way to put that into a thought for y'all. I want to say it's bullshit, right? Like this point blank period. I just want to first start with that. Like, it's bullshit. And I think it also, I'll add this to my discourse. If y'all are TV watchers or engage the media through that prism, right? I'm going to ask you, how many commercials do you see with a Black man and a Black woman in the commercial? Or put it to you this way, when America depicts a family unit, right? How often is that family unit Black? Go back and look now. So when you start to watch TV now, be attentive to that. Okay. I'm not looking for an answer, but I want you all to start paying attention to that. And then take into consideration this New York Times article that says maybe more Black women, successful Black women, should consider marrying white men, right? So what that does, and this, mind you, this article is also written by a Black man too. So I want to throw that out there, which I'm sure he's married to a white woman. I would assume that. But I say all these things to say that there is a concentrated effort by the Western media to eradicate the nuclear Black family. There's a concentrated effort by those in power to eradicate the nuclear Black family. So when I say nuclear Black family, I mean Black husband, Black wife, producing Black children, right? Any other type of family you will see propagated on media, you'll see them in commercials, you'll see them in TV shows, you'll see them in cartoons, but what you will not see is a Black man, a Black woman, and Black children. And I think this is on purpose. And I think that article bleeds into this project that's trying to be produced. And I think this is also informed by the fact that by 2045, the statistical majority of people in this country will be people of culture, not white folks, right? So another way to starve off that happening is to not have people of culture reproduce themselves, right? So you get mixed children, right? Or you allow a lot of European refugees into the country, because that increases the what? The white population. So this is my round and about way to address your question, Markeisha. It's one, to eliminate the Black family, and it's two, to slow down the darkening of this country.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like I've always paid attention to that. And I've also been, I'm not too dark, but I'm also not light skinned either. And I feel like when they try to use the Black family or the Black woman with the, you know, she's always lighter skinned or, you know, a mixed ethnicity. It's never, like you said, a full Black on Black family. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all coming different shades and colors, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And
I also wanted to say that it's kind of crazy how it's just like we go from Michelle Obama, right, being like she's with the Black man and, you know, she's very powerful and she's smart and she's all this, and we don't take away her credibility or what she of how professional she is, I guess. And then we have this other lady, and now it kind of takes, no matter what we think of her, what she's going to do, strip all that away. We're taking away what she's done and where she is, and giving it all credit to the man behind her, right? And then because he's white, because definitely no way in hell would they say, oh, she got there because of her strong Black husband. Yeah. Right? And that kind of that when you brought that up, I kind of looked into it and I kind of like felt a type of way about it, because that's just, I don't know, it's crazy. And it's kind of disgusting. And what does that tell you for Black little girls? It's like you can't be successful without, a white man behind you, or a man in general. So, and then you said, it was a Black writer. That's just like, I don't know, it's disgusting. But yeah, thank you for even bringing that to our attention, because, that was just really interesting. And yeah, I agree with that. I think they are trying to diminish, with the recent years of Black Lives Matter and stuff, I feel like people are really, wearing their hair more natural and trying to be, tap into that. And, like you said, the whole Nipsey Hussle train and what he was saying, that'll be really interesting to get into that topic. But all this stuff is coming up in society lately. And I feel like they're like, oh, okay, let's kind of water this down. Y'all doing too much. So yeah, thank you for letting me share my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think, all right, it's a cool question, Catherine, thank you. I always say, man, the most revolutionary thing Black people could do is marry Black and have Black babies. Like that's one of the most revolutionary thing that you could do. Let me just kind of point out where our material is for next week. And I hope I'll try to remember to send that out to you all, and also include the topics for our group projects. So we'll end with the Nipsey Hussle videos. You don't have to watch them in any particular order because the time is very, it's all around the same time, but please watch all three. The one with Ebro Nim is really good. That's probably where I'll focus on more, but we'll engage all three videos. And again, I'll try to email those out to you. Is there anyone else that has any questions?